Hello and welcome back to Fix It with Peter, where I'll try to fix just about anything. So today I've got an Xbox One S. I bought it off Marketplace and they said it has a faulty HDMI port. So hopefully that's all that's wrong with it and we can get this thing working again. As I go, if you have any questions or would like to add some comments about the video, maybe things I could do better, please leave a comment down below and that would be greatly appreciated. We can always learn from each other, no matter who we are. Okay, well, let's have a look and see what we have here. So at first you can see definitely the HDMI port is damaged. You can see the pins that are busted there. We've got some bending going on. It definitely doesn't look great. It looks like somebody's tried to get in here before, at least in the one spot there. Hopefully they didn't get too far, but we'll see. There's hopefully not a lot of damage inside other than the HDMI port that we need to fix. But yeah, we're definitely going to give it a shot. Always willing to try. Never be afraid to get in there and try. I mean, we've got a broken Xbox. What's the worst that could happen? It's still broken. So let's get this thing torn down and see what we can do. Okay, so now that it's completely dismantled, we can see the port in question. You can see that it's quite a bit bent. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but there's a couple pins that are quite ravaged on the inside as well. So that is definitely going to need replacement. I have a couple of replacements here. Got a 2-pack off of Amazon. It's about 15 bucks. Just to make sure. You can see the ports are identical. We've got anchor pins in the correct spot. We got wings in the correct spot. Everything looks good. All right, so let's get this cleaned up and start the removal of the old HDMI port and just have a quick glance around this board and see if we can find anything else that may be wrong with it. Okay, so I'll get this cleaned up and I'll be back. All right, so we've got it cleaned up pretty good. Now it's just a matter of getting the HDMI port off. So first thing we're going to do is put a little flux on the pins. Flux always makes things better. Makes things just come off better and flow better and all that good stuff. So now we're going to set our hot air station to about 450 degrees. We'll get a pair of tweezers. We're just going to try to heat this from the bottom, because there are little to no components on the bottom that we can damage or desolder. So we'll just give this some heat from under there till we notice that flux really starting to melt and the solder starting to flow. Now remember, never use any force to get these off. And there we go. Successfully removed all the pins. Are still there. Didn't take any traces with them. The board looks good here. All right, next step, let's get it under the microscope and clean it up. Okay. Well, it looks like that's about as good as I'm going to get that. Can't quite get the solder out of those 4 anchor points, those holes. So I'm going to have to heat it up before I drop the new HDMI port on. So they just kind of fall through the solder sort of thing. But if anybody's got some tips out there to get the stuff out of the solder, I've seen a couple of guys do it, and it just boom comes out. So I don't know if it's a technique that I'm not doing properly. Is it crappy solder wick? What's going on there? Oops, not quite sure. So if anybody's got any tips out there, that'd be more than welcome. Okay, so I stopped not using my brain and went ahead and heated up from the bottom, used the solder sucker. It was able to clear out those holes. So that is going to be much easier to install that new HDMI port. It's going to be much easier. So we'll just clean that up. Get rid of my little stand there, makeshift stand. All right, and we're going to see how this drops into place. So that looks okay, but this side, this leg here is a bit shorter on this side than it is on this side. That is curious. I wonder if it's the same way in the other one. Yes, it is. So that either means it's supposed to be like that, or I got 2 that with a short leg, but regardless, that won't make or break this repair. So let's install that back where it should be. We've got our anchor sticking out. We've got our HDMI port on so far, at least stuck there. So let's get this back under the microscope and see what we've got going on there. Okay, so we can see our HDMI port here. We can have a look at the pins. We can just give it a bit of a wiggle there so you can see the difference between the pins and the pads. Okay, and you can see that those pins are lined up very well right now. Okay, so we are going to be able to go ahead and put some solder on these 2 legs so that we can have it held in place while we do the rest. Now, one thing we want to make sure before we do this is have a look at those pins again and make sure they're nicely lined up with our pads so that when we go to attach all those, everything goes nice and smooth. All right, let's get some solder on those pads, or on those legs that hold it in. Okay, that looks all right. Let's just have a quick look from the underside. Make sure that solder is set. So now we're going to fill in these holes after we apply some flux. Or these boards really absorb a lot of heat. I have my soldering iron set to 430 degrees right now. I feel like I should raise that up. Let's go for gold here. Okay, that looks much better. So that should be all we have to do on this side of the board. So let's clean that up a little bit. Some IPA. And then that way we don't forget to come back to it. All right, let's flip this back over and secure the other two legs. So we'll just make sure we have some flux there. And on this side, just a little bit of solder. On this side, I'll try to do it so that everyone can see. Okay, there we go. Probably a little bit too much solder on there, but when it comes to those legs, holding it to the board, better too much than not enough. And they're not going to, it's not going to cause any harm. So, time for a tip change on the old soldering iron. And we can, well, that was a mistake. Solder down these pins. I forgot to hit record on my microscope. So I got the HDMI port installed, as you saw, and I've just gone around and soldered the four legs. Soldered the four legs on so that it's not going to go anywhere. Okay. Now, like I said a second ago, to myself, apparently, I might have a little bit too much solder on these legs here. This one and this one, but hey, they're made to hold it down, hold it steady, so a little bit too much there is not going to harm anything, and it's only going to add more strength, I guess. So, no harm, no foul. All right, so let's get the soldering iron tip changed. And then we're going to solder the pins. Hopefully that all goes well. We get them all nice and sturdy. All right, first thing we're going to do is add some flux. It's the one thing you kind of don't want to cheap out on. And now we will take a very small amount of solder to get started. Try to very carefully solder each one of these pins. Okay, there we go. Now let's get a little bit of IPA on there, just so we can make sure that we can see those pins seated properly, hopefully. Hopefully they look very nice. So let's zoom in there a little bit. And focus. Okay. We're going to get our brush. Carefully just sweep those off a little bit. Still have a little bit of flux down in there. Makes it look really glossy and shiny, but that looks a little bit better. So now we're going to do the nudge test. So we're going to go through each pin. Oh, first one is not soldered. Okay. It doesn't look like many of these are. Okay, so we're going to have to go over them again, but we are going to use more solder this time. Apparently there wasn't as much solder in those pins as I thought from before. Okay, so now that those are soldered on, let's do the old nudge test and see how we did there. Oh, there's a loose one. That's number 5. All right, one loose pin, not too shabby. So it was number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Give that a bit of a reflow. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nice and solid. Okay, so let's put a little bit more IPA on this, get it cleaned up, make sure it looks good, and then hopefully we can put this back together, test it out, see if our repair worked, or possibly there's something else wrong. But we will definitely find out. Okay, so let's put it back together and see what we've got. Okay, so that's back together enough so that we can test it. So let me get my setup going and we'll see what happens. Okay, it's ready to go. I just have it plugged into one of my PC monitors here. Let's see what happens. I have not turned it on yet. I haven't pressed the button, so we'll be seeing for the first time together if it was successful. Let's see what happens here. Well, what do you know? We frickin' did it. I'll be honest, that's the first HDMI port I've ever replaced. It turned out, well, just as hoped. Perfect. All right, folks. So that was a big success. Very happy with that. Let's finish putting this back together. Well, there you have it, folks. A successful HDMI port repair on an Xbox One S. So if you like this kind of thing, again, please feel free to subscribe, give the video a like, and feel free to comment if there's anything you'd like to see me fix in the future, anything you're wondering about, any extra details on any certain parts. Please feel free to ask, let me know. Also, any comments, suggestions, criticism, whatever. Anything is helpful. So that's it for today. This has been Fix It with Peter. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you on the next one.